Hello, everybody. This is Jose Youngs back for the MMA Corner News Show. I know last week I promised Josh would return, but Josh has his real job, so he can't join us. Probably not for a while unless something crazy happens or we move this, but I'd rather not move it. I like this time, Monday and Tuesday. So with me, as always, for the second week in a row, so I don't know if I can say as always, but with me again is Jeremy Klump, interview manager for the MMA Corner. What's up, Jeremy?
How you doing? Thanks for having me on again. You're stuck with my ugly face today, not Josh's.
It's both of our ugly faces, and don't
Yeah.
worry, if Josh was here, he'd have enough ugly for the both of us. So I don't know if he watched this. He better, because he is the manager of the entire site. So hopefully he does watch it. So if he does, Josh, don't come on anymore, because then you'll triple our ugliness in one person. Anyway,
And that's not good.
exactly. We're gonna jump right into it. Last week we talked a little bit about UFC Fight Night 74, Holloway versus Oliveira. For those who watched it, I'm very sorry. For those who didn't watch it, I'm also very sorry. Weird fight, weird pacing. It was very long. It seems like there was a lot of time between fights, especially on the main card. Some of the fights were a little odd. A lot of weird scorecards. A lot of weird. Somebody retired. Somebody should retire. In one fight. Solid crowd from what I heard through the TV. I wasn't up in Saskatoon, obviously, but solid crowd from what I heard. Weird performances. Just an all-around very strange card. Most people seem to put this in more of the negative column than the positive column. I am kind of in the middle. I thought there were some fun moments. I thought there were some not fun moments, and I thought there were some very bizarre moments. But we'll get into our reactions to the results and fights in a second. But Jeremy, what are your initial impressions only 2 days removed from UFC Fight Night 74?
Well, the pacing, first of all, was absolutely horrible because I did cover the event for the MMA Corner. And, oh, man, sometimes when you cover events, it flies through. It's great. And then sometimes I was drinking coffee. I was getting tired. They were slow. The pacing was bad. I think at one point, no lie, I was at my lake house covering them, actually, and I made s'mores. And I came back, and the fight still was not on. That's a true story, which was really fun. But, like you said, disappointing. The main event had a lot of hype coming up to it, and I was excited for it. I know you were excited for it, and not the way we wanted it to end. So
not at all. And for anybody who follows me on Twitter or reads the MMA Corner, I am a huge fan of both Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira. This was when they announced it, and they've been announcing fights. This was in my opinion, the fight I was most excited for that wasn't a title fight. Two very young guys. When I say young, I am positive. Max Holloway is the youngest fighter in UFC history to not only have 10 appearances, which he achieved a few events ago, but he's now the youngest to win 10 fights. And I'm pretty sure he has the most fights in UFC featherweight history. I think he passed Dustin Poirier, but I'm not 100% on that. Super young guy from Hawaii. They're always looking for the face of Hawaii ever since BJ Penn left, and they for sure got it in Max Holloway. He represents that state like no other. But Charles Oliveira, been around for a while too. Another super young guy, super exciting. As soon as Charles Oliveira won his last fight, first thing I said is match him up against Max Holloway, and I will buy that pay-per-view. Was even more excited that they put it in the main event. I really wanted to see these guys go 5 rounds, but for those who didn't watch it, Max Holloway won in about a minute and a half. And you might say, oh, wow, that's really exciting. Max Holloway cemented himself as a top 5 featherweight. No, Charles Oliveira decided to tear his esophagus going for a takedown. And yes, that sounds incredibly painful. It's actually life-threatening if you don't get it checked out. From what I hear, the screens were negative for any major issues, but he still has to go back. But if anybody didn't watch it, it wasn't even he didn't get injured from a punch. He didn't get injured from a kick or a submission. He literally went for a takedown, stood back up, grabbed his neck, and collapsed, and that was a wrap, guys. Very frustrating. A lot of lead up into the fights, like not even just commercials, but the fights dragged on. And the whole time I was like, these fights are going so long. But you know what? Main event's going to be awesome. I even remember telling people, I'm like, these fights suck, but don't worry. Main event's going to be awesome.
Holloway's coming up. It's going to be great.
No, so basically it feels like we wasted an entire Sunday, which it was weird. It was on a Sunday, so I don't think as many people watched it. It's on a Sunday. Watched a whole bunch of okay fights, and people say, like, you like MMA, you should like all fights. And it's like, no, if you're in the UFC and you put on a boring, terrible fight, like I don't find that acceptable, because we've seen the Donald Robbie Lawler fight. We know what the UFC can give us. I don't want anything less than great or good. Like if you get one of those Patrick Walsh versus Dan Kelly fights, you cannot be in the UFC, especially on the main card. I thought this was going to be a great fight. What about you, Jeremy? I know you covered it and you went into this, but yeah, you go into it.
I was so excited for Holloway, and I was the same way, telling everyone. I was watching it with my family and my girlfriend. I said, "Don't worry, it's going to be okay. Holloway, Oliveira, it's going to be good." And then they're all like, "Why are you kidding me? What's wrong? Why did you do that?" It was rough, but there is one thing from it. I did write an article that came out, I think, today or yesterday, from what we learned from the fight. And one thing that in my opinion, for sure, is that, Holloway did cement himself as a star. And that might sound weird considering he won by an injury. But I think from someone that lost or won a fight so easily and you were kind of bummed, and then to call out Frankie Edgar like that, I mean, I think it kind of – there was the cloud and then the sun was kind of peeking behind it. Like, oh, that is kind of cool. That's a great matchup. That would be awesome to see. I think he kind of showed that, he can take a negative like that and spin it off and make it a great thing for him. And I don't know about you, but I would love to see Holloway Edgar. I know you want to see a rematch, but
I wouldn't mind seeing a rematch, or I wouldn't mind seeing either. If the UFC decides to make a rematch, I wouldn't have any problem with that. I think Max Holloway would be a little upset, but then when he hears the fans' reaction, he's one of those guys that he does it for the fans, and I think he would be okay with it. Charles Oliveira wants the rematch.
Yeah.
If I was the UFC, I would book Frankie Edgar versus Charles Oliveira on one of the December fight cards. I know Max Holloway wants to fight him at UFC Hawaii whenever that's going to happen. And first thing, sign me up to cover that fight live because I'll go to Hawaii.
I'm coming with you.
Right? I would put Max Holloway versus Frank Edgar on either the same card, UFC 194, Conor McGregor versus Aldo, or put him on that tough – make that the main event of the TUF 22 finale, or put it on the – don't put it on the Fox card because I'd rather have this – on the main event. I don't want to get it overshadowed. The reason I would say to put it in December is if Aldo or McGregor gets hurt leading up to that fight, or we have another freak injury like when Aldo broke his ribs, you have Edgar and Holloway are already training for December. And it wouldn't be like when Chad Mendes filled in for Jose Aldo, he was out in the middle of the woods. He wasn't training. They just kind of pulled him out of the woods. He got a 2-week training camp. If you get both of these fighters fighting in December, they're already going through the same rigors of training camp that Aldo and McGregor are going for. Similar to what they're doing with Rockhold and Weidman, that fight card, same fight card, they have Romero and Jacare on the undercard or on the main card, just in case Rockhold or Weidman gets hurt. They can easily just take one of those two middleweights and insert them into maybe the interim, maybe it's not even interim. Probably interim but Weidman gets hurt all the time. So I would not mind seeing Edgar and Holloway fight. I love that fight, especially in December. Your thoughts?
I think it's awesome. It's a great idea. And one thing I like, you brought up Mendes. And, I'm fine with, someone loses and they bring up a reason they could lose. Mendes, one of his big reasons was if he had a full camp, he would take him out, which, some people say that's true. So if you did the way you said it, then there's no excuses. Someone gets injured, you've been training. The only thing someone could complain about is the opponent change, but at least they're in shape and they're ready to go, so there's no excuses. So I love it. It's a great idea.
And you will finally cement a true number one contender. I know a lot of people say Frank Edgar should have been the number one contender for when Aldo got hurt. He should have slid in right away, but at the time it was a lot of Mendes and Edgar, and then you had Holloway floating around. It was those three, and if you make Edgar and Holloway fight, you're going the winner of that is clear number one. There's no arguing. And the loser got the big spotlight, so I think it's a win-win for everybody. Fans would be the biggest. Anyway, moving on from potential matchups and losses, we're going to go, and we'll talk about 194, UFC Fight Night 74 a little bit at the end. Maybe I'll bring up some of the undercard fighters on the wrap-up, but we're going to talk about fights that are actually taking place. And the biggest one from the week, obviously, anytime this person gets a fight announcement or is in the news, it's going to be the biggest story, and that is Ronda Rousey announced her own fight, which I'll get into the craziness of that in my mind. Is she is not, and if you watched last time we talked about Miesha Tate versus Ronda Rousey. Me and Jeremy discussed whether we liked the idea of Miesha Tate fighting Ronda Rousey for the third time, even though she lost. And then a week ago, it was clear Miesha Tate was going to fight Ronda Rousey. UFC President Dana White said it was going to happen. She was already training. She was already getting ready. A few days later, A few days after we did the show, Ronda Rousey announced she's now fighting Holly Holm, former boxing champion, former Ring Female Boxer of the Year. And when people say, "Oh, she's just a former pro boxer," it's like, no, she was the female boxer for a while. She was the best, and she came over to MMA. She's also undefeated. I think this is the third fighter in a row Rousey's facing that is undefeated. Fourth? Third? No, because Alexis Davis was smushed in between. Because if Alexis Davis was undefeated, it would have been 5 because Sarah McMahon was also undefeated at the time. But fighting Holly Holm, who is 2-0 in the UFC, not the most exciting fights in her 2 wins. And I'll let Jeremy get into this first.
Yeah, we talked about it before we got on. I didn't want Miesha Tate, which I know you did, but I just don't really understand this one either. It's just I don't know. I mean, I don't want Miesha Tate, but at the same time, it's Holly Holm. Only 2 fights, like you said. Not anything spectacular at all. Nothing that you say she needs to be fighting Ronda Rousey next fight without a doubt. I think her first fight was a split decision win. Mm-hmm. The next one, unanimous decision. Just
not even that exciting of
it's just one of those things, and you sit there, you're like, oh man, I don't understand it. And then I know I said it, and I don't know who agrees with me, but I feel a lot of people will. I just say Ronda Rousey's going to beat her in the first round. She's going to take her down and get her an armbar. And I don't know. I'm not excited about it, which I feel the UFC should want. They should want everyone to be excited about it. And I'm really just it's another Rousey fight. I think just kind of.
In my opinion, what they're trying to capitalize on right now is the whole Ronda Rousey versus Floyd Mayweather. Rousey versus the best boxer alive, and this is the closest thing we're going to get in the UFC because Holly Holm was the best female boxer alive at one point. And whether you think she fought the best competition during her reign atop of the boxing world is a whole nother story, which we won't get into right now. But agreed, I think it's very weird. I think the only one, besides the whole trying to capitalize on the MMA versus boxer train that's been going for the last year, I don't think Holly Holmes did not do anything to be over. Like we talked about, both of her last wins were kind of lackluster. Nothing. She was knocking girls out left and right in the amateur scene, and she gets to the UFC, and she's winning these very boring, lackluster fights. And I don't think the UFC wants to see her lose to another up and coming fighter, and then all of a sudden the Holly Holm hype train is derailed. I think they wanted to get on top of this hype train right now because they showed she's not a world beater. So Rousey will probably beat Holm, which is good for the UFC because Rousey beats a boxer. Rousey stays undefeated. Rousey beats another girl and adds more to her highlight reel, adds another thing to her resume. Holm is not going to get knocked off from an up-and-coming fighter, and she'll probably lose to Rousey because she's a stand-up striker. I mean, she's very crisp. She's very accurate. She's very technical. She hasn't showed anything to show that she can even hold a candle to Rousey on the ground, let alone submission skills. But you never know. I think they're just doing it to get on the hype train right now. But the thing I would say with Holm is Correia, I think we can both agree, outside of what she was saying, outside of the people that she beat 2 of Rousey's and just like that, so I'm going to pause this thought for a minute. We have news that Frank Edgar will face Chad Mendes at the Tufts 22 main event, according to multiple reports. So we'll get into that. We'll get into that as soon as I'm done with this thought. I think we can both agree that Bethe Correia did not deserve that fight. But she was on a 3-fight win streak. She was undefeated, but all of her opponents in the UFC had a combined record of 1-7, and 2 of them just recent. One of them's not even in the UFC anymore. She got in there with her mouth. She got in there with her in-cage antics and then got put away. She didn't deserve the fight. I think Holly Holm, her years of fighting on the boxing scene, reigning atop the scene, and especially she trains at Jackson's, her fight IQ is probably the highest Rousey will ever have faced. I mean, she's been doing this for her entire life. She's not going to run in guns blazing. She's going to have a game plan. Her coach Greg Jackson is probably the best game planner in MMA. She's not gonna run guns blazing. She's gonna have a game plan, and I don't think she's going to win. But I don't think Rousey is gonna just dominate her like she has the last few opponents because they did come in with so much emotion. Holm has been at the top and has the outside of Rousey. I think has the best fight IQ in the entire division. So I think Rousey wins, but not as dominant. What about you?
Yeah, I don't know. I just think Rousey's gonna dominate her. I do disagree. I mean, you're right with what you're saying. Rousey, man, I don't know. She's just too good. She is just too good, and I just see her taking her down and just demolishing her. Armbar, first round. You hear Armbar in under a minute. I'm not. I know
Wow.
it's maybe bold, but
It's not even that
too
bold.
good.
I'm pretty sure the last fight, if you put money down on Rousey to win in less than a minute, you'd have to put like $1,000 down to win anything because it's so clear cut. But I don't know if it's as clear cut this time. I do think Rousey's gonna win. But right before we get into that Mendes Edgar thing, I'm gonna say I think the UFC might match up Miesha Tate with Cyborg. I think it's a good matchup to see if Cyborg can make 135, and if she does make 135. Put her up against Miesha, because if Miesha beats Cyborg, like how are you going to say no to Miesha? Plus, if Cyborg beats Miesha, she's going to be like, oh well, Cyborg beat the #1 contender. She obviously and made 135. There's no way she doesn't deserve the title shot. So that's just my opinion. I don't think it's going to be on this. It's obviously not going to be on the same card as Rousey. Holm, I bet it's on another card, and then if Cyborg does win, that'll set up the big fight.
I got one question for you, man.
Go for it.
Random thought. You mentioned the Money Mayweather Ronda Rousey thing. People always talk about it. Who do you think wins in an MMA fight? Honestly.
Oh my God! I think this is the worst conversation. This is the worst topic in my entire time covering MMA. This is the worst topic.
I'm glad I could bring it up.
In a boxing match, Floyd Mayweather wins.
Agree.
Easily. MMA fight, Ronda Rousey wins.
Agree.
And the thing I'm going to say, people don't talk about this. You can't wear shoes in MMA. Like Floyd Mayweather loves to clinch up. If he gets in trouble, he clinches up. His opponent gets too close, he clinches up. In boxing, you have to separate them. You clinch up with Ronda Rousey, you're getting 3 feet in, you're going to get thrown in the air and dropped on your head. There's no corner in an octagon. You can't trap your opponent in a corner. You can't cut the corners as quickly, and you can't rope a dope against a steel cage because it has no give like a rope. End of conversation. We're never going to talk about this again on the MMA Corner News Show. We're putting that to bed. I think Rousey wins MMA. You think Rousey wins MMA. I think Floyd wins boxing. You think Floyd wins boxing.
Agreed. I like it. Done. Never again.
If Josh brings it up, if Justin brings it up, anybody, if we have any guests on the show, you bring them up, I'm kicking them off because we're not having this conversation again. All right, we're getting into this thing. Frankie Edgar is now going to fight Chad Mendes on the main event on the Tough 22 finale card. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm upset because, I got all excited for Holloway Edgar, but how can you not like Chad Mendes versus Frankie Edgar? That's a sweet fight. I mean, they're both beasts. I think Mendes' only losses were, he has 3, both Aldo and McGregor, then the other one, right? If I'm correct. I mean, he's a beast. He deserves it. Him and Edgar, and then whoever wins that, and then that's the week before their fight then, you said, right?
The Tough 22 finale will take place, I believe, the day after.
The day after? All right, so then, like you said, that's your perfect idea now. Someone gets injured. I mean, I think obviously they'll have to give Edgar the chance now because Mendes had his, but great idea. There's no worry about injury now. Someone's ready. Camp's going. But that fight's going to be sweet. I'm excited for it. I don't know about you.
Now, say Chad Mendes beats Frankie Edgar. What happens to the division?
I don't know. But see, I want to see Mendes with a full camp against McGregor if McGregor wins, which he's not going to win.
If Mendes beats Edgar, I think he needs to win 1, maybe 2 more to get another title shot because whatever anybody says, like Mendes, full camp, whatever, he got knocked out in the second round. He got finished. It wasn't like it was a decision. Like it wasn't Aldo Mendes where it was
illegal elbows.
It was exactly where it was a war. Like he got finished. If he got defeated, and it didn't reach the judges. Like Conor McGregor finished him. You can't take that away. I think if he does beat Edgar, give him 1 more fight. I mean,
Holloway.
I don't know. I think I'd rather save Holloway. Let's see who Miles Jury faces in his first fight. If Miles Jury wins his featherweight debut, matchup Jury versus Mendes.
They were talking about the division, UFC Fight Night 74, and they didn't even bring him up. They were like, "Oh, this division's stacked." They didn't even mention Miles Jury.
Oh yeah, we got to see how.
We don't even know what's going to happen with him.
We got to see how he deals with the weight cut. But I like Mendes, Edgar. I think it's a very fun fight, but I think it's a very dangerous fight for the UFC because if Mendes does win, then what are you going to do? That division is going to be absolute chaos. But I think Frank Edgar has to fight in December in case Aldo or McGregor gets hurt. He can easily just slide right in. It's the day after. So I think this is the holding Frankie Edgar spot. Anyway,
Yeah.
staying on that card, we'll get into the UFC on Fox 17 and the Korea card in a second. Staying on that card, also announced was Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. I was very shocked, and if anybody on here listens to Mile High Sports, I was on. Josh had me on as a guest, and I gave my thoughts on this. I'll get into them. I'll repeat them in a second, but I'll ask Jeremy, what are your initial thoughts when you heard Tony Ferguson was going to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov?
I wanted Pettis. I don't know. I didn't hear your thing on there, but I think Pettis and him would have been great. I know that there's been beef a lot with that, and I love beef leading up to fights. I don't really like the trash talk, but sometimes you need it, and it makes fights bigger than what they need to be, like Aldo McGregor. But that's another story. I just loved. I could have sworn that's what it was going to be. I think that's who he called out too. That's who he wanted. He said he wanted Pettis. Should have been Pettis. It's not Pettis. It's Ferguson. I don't know. I'm interested to hear what you had to say. I wish I would have heard this thing now on the radio.
I think the UFC did this because they don't want Khabib to beat Pettis. And I think Khabib does beat Pettis. I think the UFC probably thinks Khabib will beat Pettis. I mean, he has probably the best top game in the entire division, if not all the UFC. I think they want to save Pettis maybe for a rematch with RDA. I know Pettis. The UFC's in a very weird spot where they have all their divisions are so competitive. They're having trouble. They don't want to lose a contender. They don't want to put the number 1 and 2 fighter in a contenders match and then have them lose like you saw Johnson and Gustafsson, but then Gustafsson gets the title shot anyway. So the UFC throws a whole bunch of curveballs. I think they're going to save Pettis. They're going to maybe – I bet they match him up against – who knows? Like maybe the winner. If Tony Ferguson beats Khabib, I bet he could fight Anthony Pettis. I think that'll be a fun fight. Maybe match Pettis up with Edson Barboza. I know he's coming off the win over your boy Paul Felder. That's a fun striking matchup. But Nate Diaz is also going to fight Michael Johnson a week or so later. I know Pettis wanted to fight Diaz. I know Khabib wanted to fight Diaz, and Michael Johnson ended up getting the Diaz lottery ticket. But I think they want to save Pettis. Khabib needs to fight someone who's not gonna they don't want him to fight a world breaker, because what if he tears his knee against Pettis? Then no answers are going to get it. Nothing's going to get answered. Also, if you watch Tony Ferguson fight, he gets taken down a lot, but he puts in a lot of work off his back. And Khabib works from the top game. Tony Ferguson has no problem working off his back. I know he trains with Eddie Bravo. He's vicious with the rubber guard, vicious elbows from the bottom. So I think very stylistically, this is a very fun matchup. Khabib, like I said, is very top pressure oriented in his game. And Tony Ferguson is very defensive, offense minded. If he uses his defense as an offense, if that makes sense. He throws up kicks and elbows from the bottom. He's very elusive on the ground. He uses the rubber guard. So I'm excited to see Khabib's top game versus Tony Ferguson's guard game. So, but let me hear your thoughts on the actual matchup between the two.
Yeah, I like what you said. Khabib he'll take you down and lay on top of you and grind you away. And I really hope that he does get the victory, though, because I want to see him versus Pettis. I really do. It is a good matchup, but hearing him call out Pettis and then not getting him, now I'm going to watch that fight going, oh, man. And especially if he beats him up, I'm going to be like, nah.
And if Khabib does beat Tony Ferguson, I think it's pretty safe to say that he's going to get the winner of Cerrone and
and then we won't see Pettis.
Exactly. Well, I bet Pettis fights the loser of RDA and Cerrone so Pettis will face the loser. I don't know if he's 100% medically cleared to even fight yet. Pettis could fight the loser, and Khabib will fight the winner. Khabib does have a win over RDA.
RDA dominating win, right?
Dominating win.
Yeah. Then he just keep taking him down, unanimous decision, right?
Yep, exactly. That was on the same card as Benson Henderson Kovylov in. That wasn't the Albuquerque. That was the Tulsa card, I believe, or the Albuquerque card, one of those. I think Khabib is the uncrowned champion. I know we talked about this before. I think it's only a matter of time before he gets the belt, but we'll have to see. Staying in December, and I know I mentioned it before, Nate Diaz is going to fight Michael Johnson on UFC on Fox. I like the Diaz brothers quite a bit. I think they were protected a little bit in Strikeforce to the fact where they didn't give him any wrestlers. They gave him all stand-up guys. And then as soon as they got to the UFC and he has to start facing guys that can actually make game plans like Carlos Condit or with a vicious wrestling game like George St. Pierre, Nate Diaz ran into some trouble. And obviously he lost to Anderson Silva, but that we saw what happened after that with the drug test. We talked about that last week. We want to talk about that again. What do you think on Nate Diaz versus Michael Johnson? Do you like the matchup, and who are you picking?
I like the matchup. I think it's a fair fight for Johnson, considering he got ripped off so bad. That I don't know. That might have been one of the worst decisions I've ever watched in my life.
For sure.
I have no clue how he lost. So I like the matchup. I think it'll be a good one. I got Johnson. I think Johnson's going to be he's going to be ticked off from that last decision, which he was, and I think everyone was. He obviously won the fight. I don't know how someone saw him not winning the fight.
I think Michael Johnson should win, but it all comes down to whether Michael Johnson could take Nate Diaz's not taunting, but just his style. Like he's very aggravating. I mean, it's very, very weird to think that at UFC, I believe it was UFC 141, Nate Diaz dominated Donald Cerrone in the co-main event. Like he just picked him apart on his feet. And looking at that now, if Cerrone fought Nate Diaz again, I picked Nate Diaz to win, people would call for my head. So Nate Diaz he's a great fighter. His guard game is unbelievable. His submission game is unbelievable, but he's taken another year-long layup. I think he's fighting because he needs the money.
That's another story.
Exactly, but who knows if Michael Johnson keeps his head on straight? I know Henry Hoof is excellent at keeping his fighters' heads on. That's his head striking coach down at the Black Zillions. But if Michael Johnson keeps his head on straight, Nate Diaz is in a world of trouble. Anyway, staying on that card. That card, for those who don't know, UFC on Fox is in Orlando, and that is Cerrone versus RDA is the main event. Co-main event, which was announced today, is Junior Dos Santos versus Alistair Overeem. This is the third time's the charm, right? This is the third time they were matched up. They originally matched up at UFC 146, which was that all-heavyweight card. Overeem ended up failing the drug test, pre-fight drug test. Frank Mir, who was on a 3-fight winning streak at the time, which is also crazy to think about, slid in, got knocked out in the second round by JDS. Kane ended up beating Bigfoot. They were booked again at UFC 160. Overeem got hurt. JDS ended up putting his foot through Mark Hunt's face with a spinning back heel kick. So third time's the charm. I think neither of them have fought in a while. Junior last fought at UFC on Fox 13 last December, which I was cage-side for, where he beat, and I put quotes because I think Stipe won that fight. Stipe Miocic in the main event. Overeem last beat Roy Nelson at UFC 186. 185, one of those, the one that was in Dallas. I believe it was 185. That was the same fight.
185.
Pettis 185.
I think.
Exactly. So while they've been fighting a while, Junior, his brain, Junior is probably, I don't know how old he's off the top of my head. I think he's early 30s, but Junior's brain might be about 90 years old after those 3 beatdowns he took from Kane. And then to top all that, he beat Stipe, but that was another war, and he hasn't fought since. So his brain might be it might be marbles at this point.
Yeah.
But on the other side, Overeem has shown he cannot take a punch very well either. So I think this is a very interesting matchup. I love the fight. I've been wanting to see this fight since Overeem was the Strikeforce heavyweight champion. Your thoughts, and who do you think is going to win?
Well, one thing that's interesting too with that, I didn't know. I think you wrote it today. I saw that Overeem. This is his first 2-fight win streak in the UFC. Which that's a little weird. I was like, oh man, that's kind of bad. But you mentioned JDS. He took those losses to Kane. He hasn't fought in a while. I don't know. It's a hard one. I just think JDS his losses were to Cain Velasquez, and look who Overeem lost to. I mean, obviously that's not a very good way to judge a fight because people change. You just said look at Diaz and Cerrone. Obviously, people will take your head now. But I think JDS will beat him. Overeem, like you said, can't take a punch very well. I don't know. I'd like to see another spinning heel kick. That would be sweet.
Agree.
But I don't think Overeem will win.
I think JDS will win and should win, but we've seen a very different Overeem the last few fights because ever since he went to Jackson's, his first fight under Greg Jackson was a Ben Rothwell fight, but I'm saying it now. He got caught. I think it was a lucky punch by Rothwell. Caught him right in the temple, and any time with heavyweights, the fight can end at any point. One punch will knock you out. I mean, JDS knocked out Kane in 69 seconds at the UFC on Fox 1, and then look what happened after that, 2 beat downs. I I think Rothwell got the lucky punch, but he won in the end. And in the heavyweight division, one punch will change your whole career.
Yeah. Look at when Overeem was crushing. Was it Silva? He was taunting him in the last round, and then Silva just
Overeem,
night.
Overeem beat Silva, Bigfoot Silva in the first. Easily won the first rounds. Got knocked down the third. He was destroying Travis Brown at UFC Fight Night, the first Fox card on Fox Sports 1. I was cage side for that, and I've never heard a louder thud than when the back of Overeem's head hit the ground from that front kick. I mean, he just blew himself out. I mean, he was just putting it on Travis Brown until he gassed out. So those are 2 wins he could have. He beat Frank Mir, but that was when Frank Mir was on that terrible losing streak. And then he lost to Rothwell. I was cage side for his knockout over Struve. That was very impressive. And I liked his fight against Roy Nelson, a very cerebral and
methodical.
Exactly. Yeah. Very, very different than what we've seen. I think that is all Greg Jackson and Coach John Winklejohn. I think they've turned him around. So if he can stay away from those bombs from Junior, but Junior's an American top team now, so it's going to be interesting. But I agree with you. I think Junior will and should win. Going back to UFC 195, we forgot to talk about it. Claudia Gadelha is going to rematch UFC strawweight champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk in the co-main event. This is the second UFC fight card to have 2 women in the main and co-main event. This is the first time they originally scheduled. The first one was UFC 184 when Rousey beat Zingano and Holm beat Pennington. But Holm Pennington wasn't the original co-main event. That went through a whole lot of nonsense before we got there. This is the first schedule. This is the first double title fight by women in UFC history. I love this fight. I think they should have had the immediate rematch. I think they should. I think I was also, again, I say this loud, I was cage side for that first fight. I had Claudia winning all 3 rounds. I know a lot of media members had him winning. I don't know. When they said split decision, how is this a split? Claudia won that. And then when they started reading them off, I was like, they're going to get this wrong. And they did. No. In my opinion, they got it wrong. But yeah. I know a lot of people who think the other way, but I know me and quite a lot of people cage side thought Claudia won. I think Claudia will win and should win this fight. Her grappling is the best. I mean, you saw that in Jessica Aguilar. She was unbelievable in that fight. Aguilar didn't win a second of that fight.
Yeah.
Whether you want to land those combos against Claudia is another story. I know Claudia Chin's in Nova União, so she's in there with José and Hendon Barral. Hendon Barral is whole nother head case, but I think she'll win. Your thoughts? Obviously, I think it's safe to say we can both agree this is the only matchup to make for both fighters.
Oh, yeah.
So who do you think is going to win, and are you happy to see them on the same fight card as Ronda Rousey?
Yeah, no, I like it. I like the women on the same fight card. I know I talked a little about it last time, It's good for girls in the world to have, idols. And I think MMA needs to start trying to cement themselves with, superstars that, girls can look up to as well. Because obviously you got, little boys looking up to all these big-time fighters. But we need to start getting some girls into the sport as well to try to get the divisions a little better when they get older. But I like the rematch, split decision like you said. You thought Claudia won. I thought Claudia won. I think she'll win this time as well. I think it's kind of crazy, 195 was announced, and there's 2 fights announced on it now. I think 2 fights, and they're both women's fights. That's all. I think that's awesome. And it's good for the sport. That's what we need. I mean, it'll be good.
I would like to see another. I know I talked about UFC 146. I believe is the first and only pay-per-view card to have all heavyweights,
all women
on the main card. I would love to see an all-women's fight card, but you have to do it very carefully because Rousey is the golden child, so a lot of people will buy the fight just for her, which I think is just – I get it, but I don't like it because there are so many great fighters. And I watched UFC 190 at a bar, and I was absolutely disgusted with what some of the casual fans were saying about the Nogueira brothers, because those two are royalty to everybody who's been watching MMA, and I was disgusted by what I was hearing because they just don't know. So I think this could change that. I think you need to put Miesha Tate versus Nunes on that fight card. I would love to see if Paige Van Zandt wins, make Paige Van Zandt versus Tisha Torres 2 for the winner, the #1 contender fight. Put anybody else. Put Sarah Coffin on that. Make Sarah Coffin the opening fight. Match her up against Bethe Correia or Zingano or any of those fights. I would love to see an all-women's fight card, but you do have to do – I think Paige Van Zandt has to be on that card.
Yeah,
she's probably the 3rd most popular. I think she's more popular than Joanna Jędrzejczyk at this point. You have to put her on. I think you got to put Tisha Torres on. I mean, she's the only one to beat Paige VanZant. That's my opinion. What do you think about all that idea?
No, I like it. I remember, I think it was you. Someone wrote an article on the MMA Corner about it. I don't know if it was you. I forget who it was, but I agree. That would be awesome. Like I said, we need more women to be idolized like that in the sport, and I think that'll be good for the sport. Like you said, headline Rousey, people will tune in, which, it is what it is. It's not fair to other people, but I think if you do headline Rousey on it, people will tune in, and then maybe you'll get someone to catch on, like, oh, hey, she's pretty good. Oh, I'm going to start watching her instead. Maybe it's not just Rousey. Yeah, I like it. It's a great idea.
Exactly, and I cannot believe I'm saying this, but UFC is going to have to do the same thing that Bellator did when they put on Tito Ortiz versus Stephan Bonner, and they put all of their superstars that the casual fans don't know as the co-main event or on the main card. So all these people are tuning in to watch Tito Ortiz and Stephan Bonner, but they're coming back to watch Will Brooks. They're coming back to watch Patricio Pitbull. They're Tito Ortiz and Stephan Bonner brought eyes to all of those people, and I think Ronda Rousey is going to do the same thing for all these women, and no one else can, and I think she relishes that idea. Anyway, we'll get into that later. It's August still, and that fight is in January. Who, for all we know, Ronda Rousey could get hurt. Holly Holm could get hurt. Knock on wood. Anyway, we're gonna move on. We're gonna talk about the South Korea card, which I think is coming along very nicely right now. They got their main event. Benson Henderson is going to fight Thiago Alves, which is weird to me because Benson Henderson said he was going to move up to welterweight, and Thiago Alves said he was going to move down to lightweight. How Thiago Alves is going to get down to lightweight is beyond me because that dude is built like a tank. But do you like the matchup? I believe it's a welterweight matchup, so maybe this is a test for both, whether Alves can handle those smaller, quicker guys, and whether Benson can do well against a welterweight. Like he's been one of the mainstays at welterweight. He fought George St. Pierre at UFC 100, but which before this year was the biggest fight card ever. Your thoughts on the matchup? Do you like it? And who do you have?
Henderson. Who did Henderson move up to fight last time? Was it
Brendan Thatch?
Thatch, and he dominated him. Or he didn't dominate him.
It was very. Thatch won the first few rounds, and Henderson had that crazy come from behind rear naked choke.
Yeah, all right, I remember now. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see how it goes. I think Henderson's one of the best in the UFC, and I like that he moves around because he was fighting under, and he moved up for that fight. He was coming off a loss before that, too, and he missed a lot.
He lost to Donald Cerrone.
Yeah. Look at you. That's funny. So, he's coming off a loss, and he risked a lot going in that fight. I mean, it's a bigger guy. He could easily lose, and that's 2 losses. I mean, obviously, the UFC would understand that, it's not 2 big losses, but now he's fighting Alves. I think Henderson's going to win. I love Henderson. I love what he brings, and I think he's going to take him in. I mean, he beat Thatch. He was losing, like you said. I thought he dominated the fight. I don't know why I forgot, but I remember now. And I think that he'll go in there and he'll win. It's at welterweight, you said?
I believe it's at welterweight. I don't know off the top of my head, but for some reason, I believe it's at 170.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's harder for Henderson then, but we'll see. I think he'll win.
I think he'll win too, but I want to see because Henderson said he was going to take because he was scheduled to fight Michael Johnson on the TUF 21 finale, but he decided to pull out for undisclosed injury. But he said he was going to take time away to recreate his body because I believe he weighed in below 170. I think he was like 160 something when he weighed in against Brendan Thatch, and he was just over. He was like a foot shorter. He was a small dude next to Brendan Thatch. I believe he said he was going to rework his body, so he was going to walk around at like 180 something and cut down to 170. If that's the case, then he can actually come in. Exactly. If he comes in and weighs 170, 169, 171, and he looks lean, then that is a scary dude at welterweight. Because lightweight, I don't know if anybody's ever talked to Benson Henderson while he's cutting weight. He is miserable. He is miserable to talk to. He's not fun. He can be kind of rude, but like I get why he's rude because he's if you watch him weigh in, his face is all sucked in. He looks like a skeleton. It does not look fun. It looks very hard. Not as bad as McGregor though. Agreed. It looks very bad. It looks very hard for him to make 155. I know he's miserable. I know he's not going to do this forever, but I think Benson Henderson has one of the best fight IQs. He's one of the best mindsets going into every fight. He truly enjoys it, so I think he wins. But Thiago Alves, those leg kicks, if people don't watch, if you have UFC Fight Pass, go watch Thiago Alves versus Josh Koscheck. And if you think that leg kicks don't do anything or can't win a fight, watch that fight. And then that will change your mind in a heartbeat because Thiago Alves' legs are like thunderclaps when he connects. So we'll have to see. I know he just lost to Carlos Condit very badly, so it'll be interesting. Staying on that card, you go ahead.
I just have thinking about weight cut, and I know we mentioned Miles Jury earlier. When I interviewed him and he talked about why he's cutting down. I think he will make the weight pretty easily. He said that he was walking around at I might be wrong here. I think it was 16% body fat. He told me.
Wow.
And I mean that's a lot for a UFC fighter. And he said that he got his diet right and he's cutting down. So I'm interested to see. He told me that he's looking to fight in December. And I know that there's already a card that's pretty stacked in December. I don't know when. I don't know if they announced anything yet, but I wonder when they're going to get him going because I think Miles Jury is a force to be reckoned with in that division. And they're not even talking about him, like I said. So I'm interested to see him cut weight since we're talking about cutting weight. And I want to see him fight that division. I mean, other than Cerrone, Miles Jury's a beast. I want to see what he can do.
Maybe you could give him the winner of – I don't even know. Who knows? Because I was going to say he could fight Nick Lentz, but Nick Lentz is moving up to lightweight. Yeah. Nick Lentz moving up. Dennis Siver's coming off a loss. Who knows? I don't know. That weight class is crazy.
Yeah.
We'll get into this more.
I got off topic.
Staying on the South Korea card, Dong Kim. We're going to mush two of these together. Dong Kim, South Korean native, is going to fight Jorge Masvidal in another welterweight fight. Staying in that thing where if somebody gets injured somewhere, you can easily insert one of those two into the main event. And Mirko Cro Cop, surprise, surprise, is fighting in Asia again because that's where pretty much all of his fans are, against Anthony Hamilton. Did not see this coming. Your thoughts on both fights, and who do you think is going to win both fights?
Cro Cop, first of all. Every time I hear his name, what comes to your mind when you hear his name?
I think of him head-kicking Vanderlei Silva's career into oblivion.
The head kick, it's crazy. So anytime I see him fighting, I mean, obviously getting up there, but I think he's going to take it. I want to see him, win in Japan, which would be awesome. Or where's the fight again?
South Korea.
South Korea. I want to see him win. He's a beast. I think that definitely getting up there for a fighter, but we'll see. And what was the other fight you asked me about?
Dong Kim versus Jorge Masvidal.
Masvidal, yeah. I think Masvidal will take it then too.
Both of these are very weird. I think Mirko should win this, but again, it's very strange that he's taking this because he came back to the UFC. He lost 3 or 4 in a row. He got dominated by Roy Nelson and then retired, just concentrating on kickboxing. Won the K1 tournament. I don't know how he won that old and taking that much damage. Won a few MMA fights in Japan, came back to the UFC, and he doesn't care at all about the belt. I know he wants vengeance against all the people that defeated him in the UFC. So can't fight Brendan Schaub. Brendan Schaub's dropping down to light heavyweight. Roy Nelson is tied up with Josh Barnett. He just beat Gonzaga. So I think they wanted him in Japan. They gave him Anthony Hamilton, somebody he should beat. And I always throw this name that's lurking around out there. If he wins, I would not mind seeing him versus Fedor Part 2. Or give him the winner of Frank Mir. Give him Frank Mir, Frank Mir knocked him out. So if Frank Mir gets win or lose, I'd like to see him fight Cro Cop. I think if Arlovsky gets past, if whoever wins most impressively between Stipe Rothwell and Arlovsky and Mir should get the title shot. If Arlovsky Mir is a 15-minute snoozer and Stipe starches Rothwell in under 5 minutes, Stipe is going to get the title shot. Give the winner. If Cro Cop wins, give the winner of the one not getting the title shot, give them Cro Cop. I would not mind seeing that, I think. Or maybe even Mitrione. Mitrione's floating around out there, too. He's coming off a loss, but he's always fun. Maybe Cro Cop gets the winner, JDS and Overeem. I know he has losses to both of them, and he's on Vengeance Tour. Your thoughts and everything I said, and is there anyone I didn't name that you wouldn't mind seeing Cro Cop face if he does win, because it is MMA?
Yeah. Did you say Overeem in there?
Yeah, he did lose to Overeem in K1, I believe.
I would like to see Overeem. That would be a good one. And, I think Overeem is going to lose because he just couldn't seem to put it together in the UFC. I think he'll lose. I think I said that earlier against JDS. So I'd like to see him win, take on Cro Cop. I think, what was it, K1 you said?
I want to say K1, but it could have been Dream. Overeem did win, I believe. I could be wrong. That was pre-UFC, and I was just getting into MMA back then. But I'm going to throw another name out that I totally forgot. Give him the Mark Hunt is going to be fighting Bigfoot in the co-main event of the UFC 193 in Melbourne. So given the winner of that, I would love to see Mark Hunt versus Crow Cop, two K1 champions. I believe this would be the first time two heavyweight Grand Prix K1 champions would meet in the octagon. So I would not mind that at all. Your thoughts?
I like it. Yeah, I like it. And Overeem wasn't a K1 champion?
I can't. Overeem.
I think Overeem wasn't he a K1 champion? I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I think he was.
He absolutely was, but I don't think he did not fight. He fought Mark Hunt under Pride, and he fought Crow Cop in Japan or somewhere. So neither of them were in the octagon.
Yeah, I'd like to see either. Either or works for me. Hunt's the beast too, so.
Heavyweight division is interesting. It hasn't been this interesting since God knows when, because the heavyweight division is so shallow, and not just UFC, but all of MMA. So very exciting stuff. Got 10 minutes left. We went through all the major fight announcements. We're gonna reel it back. Oh wait, we're gonna talk about one more. Uriah Hall. We're gonna talk about UFC Japan because that's coming up too. We got Josh Barnett versus Roy Nelson, and Uriah Hall versus Gegard Mousasi. Uriah Hall's filling in on short week's notice for Juan Carnero, I believe his name is, who got hurt. Your thoughts on those two fights, and who do you think is going to
win? Who's Hall fighting?
Mousasi, co-main event.
Yeah, I think he's ranked high in the division, but
Mousasi is way higher than Hall.
Yeah, Uriah Hall. I tweeted it after his last fight. I forget which UFC, just recent one.
The Nashville.
He's a star. He has everything in the makings to be a UFC star. Like the face of the UFC. He just doesn't put it together. I just like sometimes you watch him fight, and I think he's frustrated knowing that he could just put so much more out there. I watch him. I'm like, oh my, just let it go. Keep going. It's like he second guesses himself. I think he did an interview and he said he's been thinking too much. I'm excited for it. He had that win. He got the TKO. I think he won by TKO.
Yep.
I'm excited. I think Uriah Hall's a beast. He is an absolute beast, and I would not be surprised at all to see him pull the upset, which I don't even think it'd be an upset. I honestly am that confident in Uriah Hall. I think Uriah Hall's a beast and has all of the talent in the world to be a star in the UFC.
I think this is the first time this is going to happen on the show, but I 100% disagree with that statement. I don't think Uriah Hall is a top 10 middleweight. I mean, he could be in the lower 10, but like you said, he's a huge head case. I can't tell you the number of times I have heard Uriah Hall say, my head is on straight this time. It never is. He always gets the jitters. Gegard Mousasi, I think, is going to be in the top 5 of middleweight for quite a long time. He's the former Strikeforce light heavyweight champion. I mean, Gegard Mousasi beat Mark Hunt. Think about that. Gegard Mousasi has went 25 minutes with Lyoto Machida. He's beaten Jacare Souza back in Dream at light heavyweight. I think he is one of the best all-around fighters in the division. In all the UFC, he's very fun to watch. I think Uriah Hall is very fun to watch. He is, but I was on the hype train with you when he came out of Tough 17. I was cage side from when he lost to Kelvin. He lost to Kelvin. I was like, great fight, split decision. Kelvin was just better that day. So I was like, right, it's only a matter of time before Uriah Hall makes it to the top. I was cage side for when he fought John Howard. After that fight, I was like, there's no way Uriah Hall is going to make the top 5, let alone top 10 in any weight class. So I think Uriah Hall is fun. He can win. He goes for that. He goes for one-punch knockouts. He doesn't try to pick – if he picked him apart like Anderson, game changer. But he looks for that one punch, that one kick. He doesn't like put together combos. I think Gegard Mousasi is incredible on the ground. He's a finisher machine. He finishes pretty much everybody he beats. So I think Mousasi wins, but I think it's a fun matchup. I've actually been interested in these two fighting for quite a while. But going on to the main event, Josh Barnett versus Roy Nelson, we're going to be super quick. I think if Roy Nelson fought in Pride in the heyday, Roy Nelson would have been a superstar because they love they love the Mark Hunts. They love the Aoki, the big giant Aoki fighters, the sumo wrestler guys in Japan, especially the people the American fighters. Like Rampage was a huge superstar. I think Roy Nelson would have been huge in Pride. I think he's very popular in Japan, but Josh Barnett, like Japan is his second home. Whether he hasn't fought since November 2013, so it's going to be like a 2-year layoff.
Yeah,
He
it's a long layoff.
got knocked out by Travis Brown. His head's probably healed up some stuff. Whether he was on steroids or not, I don't know, because he's been caught twice for anabolic, not testosterone, not HGH. Like, it was anabolic steroids, and he admits it. So whether he can fight without the juice is another story. But I think Josh Barnett wins. I think he's just a better fighter. I think he goes for submission. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that doesn't matter, even if he's on steroids or not, he'll still come in with a better body type than Roy Nelson, which is always fun to watch. I am a huge Roy Nelson fan just for that reason. I think it's unbelievable to see a man. He is a big man. And usually when you see heavyweights, some of them try to at least, slim down a little. Cut. He doesn't slim down. He's a big man. And, I've always been a fan of him. I think the 2-year layoff will really affect him, or Barnett, not Nelson, sorry. I mean, Nelson's coming off back-to-back losses. I still think Nelson's going to dominate. I think he's going to win. 2-year layoff's hard to come in and go against a big guy like Nelson. And like you said, his head might have been recovered. You don't know if his head's recovered yet. It could take a while. He's fought a couple of big-name guys too, obviously, and we'll see. I think Nelson's going to win. What do you think?
I think Barnett wins. I think it's going to be a submission or decision.
Oh, you said that. I apologize.
I just think Josh Barnett is going to come back. He's going to have fun again. His head's on straight. But we'll get into that the closer it gets.
We'll see a belly rub on top of the cage.
Both of them are going to come in with bellies. You know that. Moving on, we're going to go back to UFC 174 real quick. We talked about the main event. We're going to talk about some of the other fights. Neil Magny
Fight Night 74.
Fight Night 74.
Yeah.
Neil Magny beat Eric Silva in the co-main event. Super weird fight.
By split decision.
By split. Should have been 30-27 across.
Yeah, that was horrible.
Neil Magny won. Should have been a unanimous decision. Was a split decision. I thought Eric Silva was going to win. I think Neil Magny is awesome, but I just thought Eric Silva was finally, like we talked about people with head cases. Eric Silva doesn't know what fighter he is. He's either a world beater or he gets demolished, and he got demolished his last fight. He looks incredibly out of shape. And a lot of people were talking about it just so happens that the UFC's drug policy is kicked in, and he came in looking all kinds of soft. Used to be one of the most ripped fighters in the entire company, looking super soft. Neil Magny won. This is great for his career. I would not mind seeing him fight the winner of Dong Young Kim versus Jorge Masvidal in his next fight. Your thoughts on that fight and any other fight that stands out on your mind in the entire fight card?
Yeah, definitely. Like I touched on, weird split decision. Obviously was not close to a split decision. I think one judge had it 30-27, and then the other one was 28-29, 29-28, if I'm correct. But just a weird decision. Magny, I like Magny. He's a beast. The Maia fight was hard to watch. I mean, for people that like Neil Magny, that was probably the worst fight they've ever watched.
It was a very, very public seminar on how to fight and train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah, it was bad to watch. I felt bad for him. But that's why, I like what he said in his press conference, or not his press conference, his post-fight interview. I don't know if you saw it. But he said, he's not calling anyone out. He got humbled. He got his butt kicked by Maia. Not his butt kicked, but he just got BJJ'd and it was over. So, I don't really care who he gets next. I think for him, he needs the right fight. He doesn't need to jump in and go take, a big fight again. He had the big fight. It didn't really work out for him. I think he needs to go back to the drawing board, needs to work a little more. Maybe, I don't even know who, just someone that he could, the Silva fight was good. Just someone that'll build him up again. I think he needs to be built back up. I don't think he should jump right back in against a top guy. Because I think, he loses to a top guy again. I think you're going to lose Neil Magny then for the division. Because who's going to want to see him, fight someone and then try to fight a top guy again? It's just, I don't think it'll be good for Magny.
I would say give him Patrick Cote, who won on that fight card, or you could give him the man Eric Silva was supposed to fight, and God, who's he supposed to fight?
I forget too.
Oh my God, this is gonna bother me the whole time. Oh my God. Oh, Rick Story. Rick Story. Give him Rick Story. Give him, if he wants to jump in, he loves those short notice fights. Give him Gunnar Nelson in Dublin. Would not be. Give him Wonder Boy. Give him maybe not Wonder Boy because I'll look at knocks. Give him Jake Ellenberg. Give him one of those. Welterweight division is awesome. Anyway, we only got 2 minutes left. Any other thoughts on anything MMA, anything boxing, anything kickboxing, anything combat sports? Your thoughts?
I'm just gonna touch back one more thing with UFC Fight Night 74. That's what I'll end with. OAM or whatever people call him.
Oh, yeah. Olivier Aubin Mercier.
Yeah. Oh man, that was. I don't know about you, but that was a hard fight to watch. He won, easy, unanimous decision, but he didn't really do much. That everyone's talking about how he's he's going to be a star and he's taking his career slow. I think he's taking it a little too slow right now. So I definitely want to see him. I forget who it was on the post-fight show, but they said, hey, you're going to get yours. They're going to match you up against someone who's going to defend the takedown, and you got to learn how to stand up. So I want to see him fight someone that's going to stand up and defend those takedowns. I think it'll be rough for him.
I agree, and I believe he is sponsored by Reebok. Him and Roy McDonald, I think, are the two Canadian Reebok, the face of Reebok Canada. But I think the stat was he had 3 significant strike land in the entire fight, and I think he only threw 8. I don't know how that is possible, and for you to win 30-27 across the board, he is going to have to get matched up with someone who can actually defend the takedown. I mean, the UFC might be protecting one of their Reebok athletes, but I have no problem with him going slow because the fact of the matter is, he's going to run into somebody who can defend the takedown sooner or later. I know people are complaining about Conor McGregor not fighting wrestlers. I didn't really care because the fact of the matter is it's coming sooner or later. Whether he doesn't fight anybody for 10 fights, in his 11th fight, he fights a wrestler and gets dominated, and everybody's like, oh, I told you so. It's going to happen sooner or later. So I don't care who they match him up with. I would like to see him maybe get a better competition, somebody who can actually do something, like know how to defend it. Well, no, that's not fair. Like his opponent, I can't remember his name, defended everything very well. So anyway, we're closing off in a few minutes, real soon. Any other thoughts on anything combat sports?
Last thing I'll end with is UFC 191's a great card. So if you're looking for a great UFC fight card to put some money down for, it's worth the money. It's going to be sick. There's a title fight. There's just stacked fighters on it. So get ready for that one.
I agree. We didn't even talk about that fight card outside of Arlovsky and Mir and maybe a little bit of Paige Van Zandt, but Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson, who in my opinion right now is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. I know you can make an argument with José Aldo, but José Aldo just hasn't fought in a long time. Yeah. And in my mind, if you haven't fought in a while, you drop down one peg. And I think right now Demetrius Johnson is the best fighter alive, and he gets no respect. You saw all those numbers for UFC 190. Ronda Rousey won. Demetrius Johnson is – if Demetrius Johnson was a woman, Ronda Rousey would not be the champion. Yeah. If Ronda Rousey was a man at 125, she would not be the champion. Demetrius Johnson is perfect at everything. Wrestling, striking, submission. He's the best.
He's fun to watch.
He is fighting the one person, I think, in the entire division who can beat him. Henry Cejudo is a wild card. I think John Dodson has more power than anybody in that division. That was an incredible first fight. I think Johnson takes it, but agreed. 191, buy it. If only to see the best fighter alive. This is Jose Youngs, Jeremy Klump, the MMA news show. This is a wrap. I know it's Tuesday. I'm trying to bring it back to Monday. See you guys.
Take care.